Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning in this week. We have a great episode for you. But as always, before I introduce the guest, I have to go over a few of the less exciting but just as important things. So, firstly, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review the show. It helps boost the podcast, grow the audience, and ultimately helps me get the best guests onto the show, which makes the best show for you guys to listen to. Additionally, please follow me on social media, ROYBTZ on Instagram and ROY_BNTZ on Twitter. On Twitter, you can subscribe to the newsletter, which gives you access to all the updates, occasional blog posts, news about the guests and future of the show. And most importantly, it's just a very easy way to get the podcast each and every week into your inbox. So, easiest way to do that. Finally, please consider supporting this independent podcast. I made the decision not to work with any sponsors at this juncture. Perhaps that will change later on, but right now I do not want to bring on any sponsors. So your contribution helps keep this podcast independent for as little as $5 a month. I really appreciate you guys. And finally, if you want to start your own podcast, which I highly suggest you do, I have a full tutorial that covers everything you need to know, soup to nuts, A to Z, how to start, grow, execute, market, reach out to guests. Really everything you need to know is in this ebook. So feel free to check that out. Link is in the show notes. All right, let's move on to the guest. This week I have Nir Barzilai. Nir is a founding director of the Institute for Aging Research at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and the director of the Nathan Schock Center for Excellence in the Basic Biology of Aging. His credentials and list of his accolades run long, so I will spare you that, but Nir is one of the leading scientists in the world right now researching aging and the diseases around aging. So I was more than happy to have him on. We covered a whole range of issues regarding aging. So if you are interested in learning more about what the most up-to-date science we have right now on curing aging, and when I mean curing aging, this isn't a Benjamin Button thing where we're reverse aging. This is for you to live your full life expectancy in the healthiest way possible with the least amount of diseases. So I think that's something that maybe is not put forward in the most clear way through the media sometimes. The media likes to focus on this fountain of youth, this magic pill or something of that ilk that will just magically solve all your aging issues. This is not what we're talking about. This is not some woo-woo stuff. This is the latest scientific research that is available, and Nir is leading that. So, without further ado, let me introduce this week's guest, Nir Barzilai. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Nir, how you doing? Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. This is it's arguably one of the most interesting and important topics to discuss. It's our health, it's our lives. So I'm glad I have someone with your capabilities and with your background to come on and podcast and discuss this.
Thank you. In fact, I think it's the most, not one of the most. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's up there, right? I mean, there's so many pertinent things that are happening in the world right now that feel like they catch all of our attention at some point or another. So it's definitely up there for sure. All right, so maybe if you can tell people a little bit about yourself for people who may not know who you are.
So I'm currently the director of the Institute for Aging Research at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, which is one of the biggest centers. I don't want to annoy anyone. I think we're the biggest center, but it depends how you count the size. But we're certainly a very significant center for the biology of aging. In fact, it's an institute that has two centers. One is funded by the NIH and one is funded by other things. And we're really all interested in the biology of aging, and can we use it in order to increase our health span, mainly our health span, but potentially also our lifespan.
And I guess what sparked your interest to, and I'm using air quotes right now because I still maybe don't fully understand this, to cure aging? I'm interested what got you started in this?
Well, it really started as a kid. Kids today look at their grandparents, and I don't think they realize they're going to look like them. Okay, where are they? How did they come here?
Yeah.
Who made them that way? And for me, it was a curiosity that started with my grandfather that told me story about what he's done when he was young. And I'm looking at an old guy. He was only 68 when he died. Okay, an old guy, obese, slow, bald. And I said, no way. And it's something that stuck. It was like, and then I was a medic, and I went to medical school, and I was an intern and resident, and it was always the major thing. In other words, you can go to a movie theater and you can look around. Well, can you go? I mean, we're post-COVID. I have to think what I'm saying, but
depending on what state you're in,
right? You go to a movie theater. You look around, you don't know who has diabetes or high cholesterol or hypertension, but you do know who's old and who's young. I mean, that was always the major thing for me that needed an explanation. And we also know that it's the old people that start accumulating diseases and dragging diseases and dying with a bad quality of life after years of diseases. That, for me, was the major issue, and not all those diseases that we get and we're trying to treat and cure. And in fact, it's the other way around. It's aging that is the risk for those diseases. Aging drives those diseases. So, for example, you can be born with genes for Alzheimer. There is a genotype that people know, ApoE4. If you have that, you're likely to get Alzheimer sooner or later. Okay, you don't get it when you're born or when you're 1 year or 10 years. It takes decades to get the Alzheimer. You need the biology of aging to get Alzheimer. It's the same for all other diseases.
But can you detect those genes early on and potentially stop it, or is that not a science that exists yet?
Well, we can detect a lot of genetics early on, but the point is that if we target aging, they don't need to be influential. For example, this same genotype, this ApoE4 genotype, I have a cohort of centenarians, okay, 100 years old. I have 750 family of 100 years old, them and their children and everything. And two of them have this genotype, okay, and they're not demented and they're not dead, okay? So if you have the ability to slow aging enough, you don't get even those diseases. So for us, stop aging and stop not one disease, Alzheimer, cardiovascular, cancer, all of them, their major risk is aging. Okay, stop all of them, and then you're going to live healthier and longer. And that's what we're trying to do.
I have a lot of questions. So I guess let's start off with some basics. And I'm assuming the audience is just as unaware of a lot of the stuff as I am and just want to learn. Why do your chances of getting all these diseases that you mentioned, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, et cetera, increase as you age? Like, what is the reason behind that? Is it just an accumulation of wear and tear on the body over time?
In part, look, from a biological perspective, we, and when I say we, geroscientists, okay, that's what we call ourselves, unlike anti-aging people who are, that's a different thing. We're geroscientists.
Okay.
And we agree.
So geroscientists are scientists that focus on aging?
Correct.
Okay.
And we agree that there are hallmarks for aging. We can argue if it's 7 or 9 hallmark, it doesn't matter. We have hallmarks of aging. How do you become a hallmark of aging? You have to show that something goes wrong when you get old. And when you fix it, your animals are going to live healthier and longer. Not only that, you don't need to fix all of them together. You fix one, you affect the others too. So, in other words, we have a lot of knowledge of where do we start. Now, I didn't tell you that those are the mechanisms of aging. They're not necessarily the mechanism of aging, but they're targets, okay? We know that they go wrong, and we know that if we fix them, we have a major influence, okay? So this is our start, and that's the most important thing that we've done so far, because we have this proof of a concept that we can target aging and we can delay it and even reverse it and stop it and reverse it in several instances.
So that's the part that I personally don't understand, because the idea to cure aging, just those, it's almost like, I think like there's like a marketing team that needs to come up with like a better way to say this, because there's no way to cure aging in the sense of you're still going to get to 80 and 90 and 100 and 110, hopefully. Like, there's no way to cure aging. There's a way to make ourselves healthier, right? And not incur those diseases that most people do get when they become older, right?
Look, cure is something that you said. I didn't use the word cure, but let me paint the challenge in a different way.
Sure.
There is the Dorian Gray scenario. Okay, Dorian Gray had a chronological age, but he stopped aging. He could see his chronological age when he looked at the mirror. Okay, so can we do a Dorian Gray? By the way, I'm looking at you now. I see myself, and I know I'm Dorian Gray because I see somebody my age, but I know that I'm much younger. Okay, it works. You look at the mirror and you say, "Oh, too bad for this guy. I'm much better." Most of us do it anyhow. So this is one challenge, and I can tell you how this challenge is going. It's really about targeting aging and trying to delay it as much as we can. The second scenario is the Wolverine or the fountain of youth. You take old people, you put them in the pool, they get out young. That's a huge order, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't think this is what we're going to be successful in doing, although I told you already that we can take at least old animals. We're testing it in humans. We take old animals and we treat them when they are old, and we make them much healthier. They don't live that much longer, but they live healthier for the rest of their lives. So there is some success here. But the future, which eventually is going to be the easiest thing to do, is to take somebody who's 20 or 30 years old and give them a treatment, and we have some ideas of what treatment we would do. Give them a treatment and basically erase their aging every month or year or something like that and repeat it. That's the Peter Pan, by the way. That's the Peter Pan scenario, okay?
Yeah.
And Peter Pan doesn't go old. And keep people young. Now, every one of those scenarios has challenges, may or may not be successful, but I'm sure that over time we'll make a major progress. Look, our lifespan as a species is 115 years, okay? I mean, somebody lived to be 122, but statistically, we have the capacity maximal to live 115 years. By the way, that doesn't have to be the future, okay? But we die before age 80 on average. So we are 35 years that we can start realizing right now, and we have tools to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think back in the day, if you got to, I don't know, like 100 years ago, what was the average age? Like, people would die when they were in their 30s, 40s, right?
Well, look, they're 100,000, between 50,000 and 100,000 years of humans' evolution.
Yeah.
Okay. And through most of it, life expectancy was somewhere between 19 to 35, probably somewhere around 25. It's the last 100 and 150 years that all of a sudden we got to 78. And we did a deal with the devil, basically. We thought it's a good deal. He gave us water and sewers and surgery and antibiotics and vaccination and food. And what did we get? We get Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, things that we didn't get before, okay? So we got to this stage, and now we're asking, just a minute, can we get out of this deal? Can we do a better deal? And the answer, yeah, we can do a much better deal.
Yeah, which that is funny that you bring it up, because I always think about this. Like the only reason pretty much the only reason we're as healthy. We have food that is abundant. And I'm talking about, obviously, the Western world. Not every place is the same. But in the West, pretty much our lifespans are longer. We're healthier. We have surgery. We have antibiotics. We have, COVID vaccine that came out pretty quickly. Like all these things are available to us. And yet we, for the most part, deem big pharma and drugs as a bad thing. Like everyone is looking for the natural, which I'm not saying that is bad. It's just interesting how the only reason we are where we are is because of those medical advancements. And we deem a lot of it, quote unquote, evil or bad.
Right. Look, it's true that throughout, when I look at the medical profession, the first thing they teach us is to do no harm, okay? But this is because through our professional evolution, we sometimes did more harm than good, okay? It's a balance like that. But the balance has really tripled our lifespan, okay? More than tripled our lifespan. So we actually, certainly from a lifespan perspective, we've done more good than harm. And the question is, now that we get to this stage, how we can rescue it farther. And this is the challenge that we're bringing. And it's a challenge because people, the NIH stands for National Institutes of Health. So there's the National Institute, the National Cancer Institute, and the National Institute for Heart and Blood, and the National Institute for Diabetes and Kidney. So first of all, they're not Institute of Health, they're Institute of Diseases. Okay. The only Institute for Health is the National Institute for Aging.
Yeah.
Okay, that they're saying, how about, but the fact that we're in silos like that really prevents us acceleration because everybody is very protective of their stuff and they don't want to, it's hard to sell to any one of the institute, oh, you have a heart disease? So first of all, don't pay investigators who are looking at heart disease on young animals, okay? Because there's a biology of aging. And that's why we're not so successful with drugs, because we study young animals and we cure young animals. That's ridiculous. It's a totally different template. But you have to understand that the best thing to do any invention is to target aging. By the way, I'll tell you this story. I was in the Vatican. I'm very connected with the Vatican. Was invited several times. Cardinal Ravasi is number 4 in the hierarchy of the Vatican. He's the pontiff that includes culture, that is the pontiff for culture, that includes science. And in one of the sessions, there was Joe Biden, who was then vice president, and the Pope. They were the keynote speakers, okay? And basically, Joe Biden came and said he was doing the moonshot for cancer, right? And believe me, to treat cancer, to solve cancer is so much more complicated because every cancer has a genome that's different than your own genome and different than any other cancer in the world. It's so personalized. It's so expensive, okay? It's really a big task. And so he talks about this moonshot. And the Pope comes and say, I'm still hoping that there'll be one drug that will be cheap and available and will cure all cancers in the world, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm going and I'm speaking about this drug that's called Metformin that that is the cheapest drug in the market. Okay, the cheapest drug, you can get 400 pills for $20.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't cure cancer, but it prevents cancer. And it prevents cancer, but it also, as a side effect, I said, prevents diabetes and Alzheimer's and mortality. Okay? So I have a drug like that. And maybe that was, I got hand claps, but most people don't know about it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm happy to talk with you, because I think your audience is part of the people who, and young people, by the way, care more about aging than old people. I find old people like, nothing is going to help me.
Yeah.
Although it's never too late to treat aging, but young people are looking at us and looking and saying, can you really do something about it? We're in.
Yeah, I think old people are set in their ways. They're like, there's nothing I could do at this point. They're and young people are more open to new things, new experiences, new drugs, new ways of increasing their life or making their lives healthier, which is, I think, why it's so complicated to figure out what is the best route to go about. I mean, there's literally millions and hundreds of millions of biohacks, diets, vitamins, supplements, exercises, pills, books, creams. Like, it's endless, right? Like, and all of them, and a lot of them are promoted by doctors, right? Like, oh, I am this doctor. Or, there was a period I was really into veganism and I was watching all the juicing stuff. And they were literally showing how, with eating a plant-based diet versus a meat diet, you can turn on and off cancer cells. And myself as a viewer, if this doctor is saying it, I should probably believe him, right? Like, I don't have the time and the bandwidth to sit down and dissect every single thing that they're trying to sell me. So, like, how does the average person viewing this stuff, like, how can they tell, like, what's good and what's bad?
You're absolutely right. That's a major challenge. It's an extra major challenge for us because of what I said before. There's a lot of anti-aging marketing. Okay. Yeah. So how do you know what's right and what's wrong? So first comment is, a lot of the things that you get are at least good for the economy, right?
Yeah.
So they have an advantage. You hope, and you'll be right, that a lot of them don't have anything to harm you inside. They don't have even what they claim they have. So they're usually safe, but some are
placebos.
Right. Some are harmful. And aging is a good place to be, because you say, you'll take it and you'll never die. And if you die, who sues you? Nobody sues you. It's a good place to be. So what do you have to do? And you look, there's Dr. Oz, okay? He got into so much problem by tilting things that he figured out he might as well run for the Senate now, right? For Pennsylvania, because lying is not, it's a lost commandment.
Yeah.
So what really do you need to do? What you need to do is to find what we call a clinical study. A clinical study means they took a bunch of people, and half of them got whatever you're testing, and half of them got a placebo, and they couldn't know the difference. And you have an outcome for that, okay? And you have to look if you reach the outcome. If you just believe in something and you didn't check what's the outcome, it's all about your hope. It's not about any promise, okay? And I think people should be educated about that. The marketing are very, they don't need to lie to say, first of all, biologists have said that this is important. And people who took the drug said that it changed their life, okay? That's all bullshit. You want to know the truth? You have to see a clinical study, and potentially more than one, okay? And you have to see who funded the study, and you have to, I also know I know to design studies like that, and you
Mhm.
can design a study that will work. You want to see what it missed, who it includes. Was it only young people there? Did they have old people? There's lots of stuff, men, women. There's a lot of stuff that we skip because we're kind of lazy. Well, we're not lazy. We're lazy to do,
No,
but
it's
we're
a lot of
overwhelmed.
work. It's a
It's
lot
a
of
lot
like
of work.
what you just said. Like for the average person, that's a lot of work. Like I have to go find the study. I have to read the study. I have to make sure it's not backed by some corporate interest. You know what I mean? It's a lot of stuff to go
Yeah,
through.
but I would say that if you are deciding on a drug,
Mhm.
okay, if that's what you're going to talk, we're not talking about everything in the internet.
Yeah.
You read, you heard, you said, I want to take this drug. Well, look at the evidence for that. Okay. And if there's no evidence, again, maybe it's hope, maybe there's no harm,
Mhm.
but you cannot hope. Not only you cannot hope for an effect, you even don't know if you'll have a side effect. Look, there are trade-offs. Almost every drug has trade-offs.
Yeah.
We're looking for the drugs that their side effect will be longevity. Okay, we'll apologize for that. We don't know if you can afford to live longer. Okay, but there are trade-offs, and we need to educate from school better, so that people are not going to be so influenced by marketing.
Yeah. What are there clinical studies on metformin?
Yes, there were lots of clinical studies. So there are two kinds of studies, right?
Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. Before, can you maybe explain what metformin is and what it was historically used for before it was potentially used for longevity?
Yes, metformin, first of all, is a modified extract of French lilac. So I'm saying it because lots of people, they want only something that is from a nutrient, nutraceutical. So it is modulated. It does need a prescription, but it's an extract of French lilac. And there's a lot of people who notice if you take this French lilac and you eat it, what happens? And in the 1950s, there were a lot of papers suggesting that people on metformin have less inflammation, it prevents flu, it prevents malaria, lots of other diseases. But it was also noticed then that people who had diabetes and took metformin, their glucose was lower. And so it became an anti-diabetic drug. And the good news is that it's an anti-diabetic drug for almost 80 years. And there are billions of years of use of this, and there's a lot of clinical studies. So we know a lot about metformin. And from clinical studies, we know that it prevents diabetes in a placebo control, that it prevents cardiovascular diseases in diabetics when compared to other drugs, that it prevents cognitive decline in non-diabetic people. And there's a lot of association studies, like there are more than 250 studies showing that people on metformin have less cancers. And then there's a really cool study that included 180,000 people from pharmacies in the UK, patients that were treated in the same pharmacies by the same doctors. And first of all, when you look at people who started metformin and they looked on mortality, 5 years mortality, people who took metformin compared to the other anti-diabetic drug had half the mortality. Okay, but that's one thing. People who took metformin also had significant less mortality than people who didn't have diabetes. So let me say differently. The people on metformin had diabetes, they were more obese, they were more sick to begin with, but they had less mortality. So take everything I said, that metformin is associated with less diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, okay, mortality, cardiovascular disease, then you understand that it's really an aging drug.
Yeah.
And indeed, if you give it to animals, they live healthier and longer. And it also targets pretty much all the hallmarks of aging that I mentioned before. So for me, metformin now is a tool, okay? Is a tool. I'm working with the FDA, and I'm working to do this study with the American Federation of Aging Research to show that metformin can prevent a cluster of age-related diseases, and to get an indication really to treat aging, to prevent aging.
Do you have to do other things while you take metformin? Because it does. I don't want people to think it's some, like you said, a fountain of youth or some cure-all for everything. Like, because sometimes I'll try to explain a little bit better what I'm thinking. A lot of times when I'll see studies, it'll say something like, 100,000 people did this study and showed that vegans live longer and healthier than meat eaters, right? Something like that. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's good to know vegans. And I start thinking like, but do they take into account like all the other things? Like, were those people smokers? Were they exercising? Are they married? Are they poor? Are they rich? Like, do they have stress in their lives? All these other factors, right? Do they live in a good community of people? Are they lonely? There's so many factors to take into account. So when you take metformin, like, do you still have to not smoke, exercise, eat healthy, all those other things, or not? I don't know.
But by the way, that was the Women Health Initiative is a really good example where we, including me, I'm an endocrinologist, thought that, and I actually studied endocrinology because I thought if you fix all the hormone in elderly, they live younger and healthier. Totally wrong.
Okay.
So women who are 60 years old and post-menopause, when they got estrogen, they became, versus placebo, they had more heart disease, more breast cancer, cognitive decline. Okay, they had better skin, but they have lots of problems.
Some women would take that.
Why did we think though that estrogen was good? Because the women who took estrogen also exercised and did yoga and were thinner. They ate better. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm saying, if you don't do a clinical study where you take people and they're half group, okay, some exercising, some not. So they should have the same thing. Some obese, some not. They should be similar group, and you do a study that's big enough so that really everybody is inclusive in both sides.
Yeah.
And you show what's the effect. And then you can even say, was it better with men or women? Was it better? You can find the subgrouping. But the answer to your question is metformin in the clinical studies worked, okay, which means they already accounted for what happened in the group because nobody knew who's getting metformin and who getting the placebo. Not the doctors and not the patients. And that's how you overcome. And by the way, I don't mean to say, I still think if you ask me, what should I do now? The answer is going to be exercise and diet, okay? There's no doubt about it. They're important. But I'm talking if we want to go to drugs. And by the way, we want to go to drugs, okay? And the reason I'll tell you a few reasons why we need drugs. So people who survive cancers, because we give them radiation and chemotherapy, we age them. Mm-hmm. They get age-related disease early on. Kids who survive cancer sometimes have heart disease when they're 35 years old.
Wow.
Okay, we need to help them.
Yeah.
With a little bit more than. People with HIV get diseases 10 years younger than people their age. Disabled people who cannot move and are also eating more, they get into trouble. And I want to talk about two other examples just to make the case. And I'm doing a bit of provocation here.
I like provocation.
Think, okay, who needs help? The poor needs help. Look, poor all over the world live much shorter than rich.
Yeah.
Okay, in cities in the United States, there's at least 15 to 20 years differences between the poor and rich. In England too, okay, almost around the world. The poor needs better because the rich are able to exercise, to eat better, they're more aware, they're seeing, they're reading.
Best doctors.
Okay, so what can you do to the poor? First of all, you can start thinking about nutrition. But what does that mean? You have to push vegetables and fruits that are not so cheap. You have to make them available. Okay. They also should eat fish, so it's one thing to give the fish, but then they have to actually eat the fish. Not everybody likes fish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's a huge effort that you need to get this food and you need to educate them and you have to find a way to make the fish better. Okay. They also need to exercise. So you have to build gyms maybe so that they're available, or you have to allow them to get some treadmills in their basement and stuff.
But exercise can be free. You can just go out the building and start running or jogging or walking.
But they're not doing that, right? You want them to do that. You want to give them the tools to do that. And walking, in Alaska, you don't walk now. It's snowing. Okay. The exercise has to be daily. But the point here is when you calculate the price of metformin is generic and cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to spend $100,000 for every dollar of metformin to improve health span. Okay, in other words, the drugs, okay, can be cheaper than the lifestyle intervention. And believe me, the main thing we should do all is exercise, move, and diet. Yeah. Okay, but look, I'm in diabetic clinic. I'm doing diabetes several times a month. I'm looking at fellows. I have 30 years in this clinic. How many people with diabetes that I tell them you should exercise and diet? How much success do I have? 3%.
Really?
Okay? Oh, yes.
Wow.
Okay. My diabetes clinic is in the Bronx. Okay. No, it's very easy to say you should stop that, you should stop that. People are not doing that. Okay. They're not in life in prison. They don't want to stop what they like or don't like, right? So it's a challenge. So I'm saying we need to do it. Now I'll give you another example on the other side, another provocation. You know how those guys, Bezos and, are spinning 20 minutes in the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that they want to go somewhere, right? They maybe want to go to Mars, okay? Look, if you don't prevent aging, you're not going to get there because of cosmic radiation, you're not going to get there without cancer or heart disease, and you're never making it back. Mm-hmm. Okay, so even if we want this exploration, first thing we have to do is stop aging.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. Do you think so let's take people who are maybe obese, right? Obese is obviously not a good thing, even though for some reason they're trying to promote it nowadays as if it's okay. It is definitely not. But if people are not willing to go exercise and change their diets, even though maybe their lifestyle is not comfortable, right? Because it's not comfortable walking around with all that extra weight. It's not good on your joints. It's not good, just generally speaking, probably not very comfortable. Metformin could still decrease their chances of getting all those diseases, even though they're not going to go with the diet route and the exercise route, right?
Right. Look, obesity accelerates aging.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, COVID, okay, if you were over the age of 80, you were 200 times more likely to die than if you were in your 20s. Okay. Obesity in the same studies was eightfold. Okay. And it's eightfold mainly because it increased the aging phenotype of those people. But interesting to know that people on metformin in 9 studies around the world had less hospitalization and less mortality, okay, when they're on metformin and had COVID. So we actually see how those gerotherapeutics can influence epidemic. And that's not the only drug, the gerotherapeutic that was tested. There was another drug that tested. So even for this pandemic, imagine if we could have prevented 2/3 of the mortality, it wouldn't have looked like that at all.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's crazy. Is there a precedent for other drugs that were used for one thing at some point and then they realized it's actually good for something else, kind of like metformin?
Yes, there are several such drugs. I actually wrote a paper. It's in a minor revision, so I think it'll be published soon.
Okay.
Where we looked at all those that are geroscience, right? And FDA approved drug. So they had effect on health span and lifespan in animals and in humans. And there are several such drugs. There's really good information on 4 of them. I don't know if I should go to names. One that is very famous is called rapamycin. Rapamycin okay. is given in very high doses as an immune suppressor. But when it's given in regular doses, it's actually an immune stimulator. And when you give it to animals, they live significantly longer. By the way, the animals that live the longest with gerotherapeutics are the combination of metformin and rapamycin. They live 24% longer.
Are these rats?
Those are actually mice. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the correlation between intermittent fasting and increased health and longevity. Personally, I've been doing intermittent fasting for the past maybe 2 years or so. And obviously, I don't know longevity, right? I'm still fairly young. We'll see the effects in 40 to 50 years, but I do feel better. I do feel more energetic. And it's counterintuitive to what I thought for the longest time, because I thought the more I ate, the more fuel I have, the more I'll feel better, et cetera, et cetera. And, and obviously they were always telling us like you should eat 3 meals a day, even though back in Israel, no one really tells you that. I don't usually eat 3 meals a day. But here in the US, I know that's what they've been telling them for the longest time. And it's weird because now that I start eating later in the day, I'm actually more energetic. I'll go on hikes in the morning with nothing in my stomach. And I'm more energetic than the people who ate something in the morning. So can you explain maybe the connection between the two?
So first of all, I'm on intermittent fasting. Our geroscientists are on intermittent fasting, okay?
Okay.
So I'm on intermittent fasting a little bit longer, probably more like 3 years, 2.5 years. BC, it started BC, so before Corona. And I share everything you said was true to me. Now, why am I doing it? Because in my lab, when I tested gerotherapeutics, there is the control animal that get placebo, right, or whatever we give. And the control animal are what we used to call caloric restricted animal. They get 30, 40% less food, and they live 40% healthier and longer. So when I told you metformin and rapamycin are 24%, they're kind of a little bit 2/3 of a way to caloric restriction, right? Which is our gold standard. But it's taken, right? It's taken as less for breakfast, less for lunch, less for dinner. But we gave the food to the animals in the morning, and they were hungry. So they ate the food in 20 minutes, and then they were fasting for 23 more hours.
Wow.
When we start giving them the food throughout the day, they were thinner, but they didn't live longer. Okay? So then I understood we totally missed the fasting part. And in fact, I'm doing studies now, taking young and old people to see where the biology of aging changes, how many hours we really do, because 16 is kind of our invention, I don't know if it's 16. If it's 12, I want to know, because maybe you do two meals. But what I find in doing that, first of all, let's start with something that I said before. It's not good for everyone. Okay, not everybody can do intermittent fasting. Sometimes the reasons are not true. If somebody says, "Oh, my glucose gets lower," that doesn't happen. Okay, it happens if your liver is fucked up. But if you have liver, your glucose is not going to go down. Okay, I don't know what you're feeling, but there are lots of excuses why people cannot do it. But for me, if you would give me a diet for 3 months, I could break any day. But I'm not going to break if I have an hour to go and then I eat whatever I do. I'm just not going to break. It's very easy for me. But also the reward, right? And I don't know if you noticed that for me, the rewards, in few weeks, I lost like 8 pounds and I started feeling so much better. I wasn't trying to lose weight, but I felt so much better. I felt so energetic. My exercise capacity increased. So for me, for you, it's good. I suggest to try it. I have to tell you that from a weight loss perspective, it works better in men than women. And I don't know why, but a lot of the aging is different between men and women. And some of the gerotherapeutics are even different between men and women. So we have to see.
Yeah, that's interesting because they do live longer, women, and I'm interested also on if there's a reason that you figured out. But I guess as far as the intermittent fasting, you're saying it's better to, and I guess you're still figuring it out. We don't know if it's 18, 16, 14, 12 hours per day. Like what is the exact time? And again, that, like you said, that could be different maybe for everyone. Maybe for some people it's better 12, maybe for others 18. But that is better than eating throughout the day, but less calories. So if I eat 3 or 4 meals a day, but my meals are smaller, that's not as efficient as eating it within a time window of, let's say, 8 hours.
Right. And this is from an aging perspective. Okay. Yeah. From an obesity perspective, maybe you can do other diets, but I'm interested in aging. And if you want to target aging, that's what you have to do. Okay.
And then, like I was saying before this one, as far as women, is there a reason? Because historically men were, I don't know if this was historically men were hunters, they were out in the field, they worked the most dangerous jobs. That was part of the reason they died. But now that we live in a society where we're pretty much all doing the same, women are still living longer. Is there a reason?
Yes, there is a biological reason, and we see it all the time. The aging of women and men, there are commonalities, but there are also differences. They have different, right? They have different chromosomes, and they have different hormones, and it all plays a role in aging. Life expectancy of men in the United States until the last 2 years were 4 years difference. It's a huge difference, okay? Even if we cure only heart disease, okay, we'll get a year or two, right? Because people will get Alzheimer's, some other disease. 4 years is a lot.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, we underestimated the differences because in the lab, we always used male animals because we had this excuse that the female are menstruating and that's going to change a lot of the biology. And we found an excuse. And now that we started to look at male, female differently, we found out all the biological differences between them. But, for example, today, lifespan differences between men and women in the United States is 6 years, okay? So what happened that men lost 2 years of life? Unrelated issue, opioid crisis.
Yeah.
Gun violence. White middle-class men are doing very poorly in the United States, and poor people, okay? So men are targeted a little bit in differences than women from an environmental, let's say, or cultural perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, no, opioid is a serious pandemic that I feel is under-reported on and under discussed, but that's for a whole other episode. Before I let you go, I want to ask a question that's a bit more, I mean, it could be scientific, I know, but it's just, I still see it in the realm of science fiction. How bullish are you on life extension? Do you see a world, maybe not in the next 10 or 20 years, but 50 or 100 or beyond, where we live longer, like 200 years, 300 years, maybe longer? I don't know. Is that an actual possibility at some point?
Yeah, look, I told you that metformin will add several times to health span, but my research is actually about centenarian, okay? That already lived 20, 30 years longer, healthier and longer. And we're finding those longevity genes, like in those people in the beginning, we talked about this ApoE4 genotype. And if you have genes that slows your aging, then you can have lots of bad genes and they're not going to be into effect. In fact, I have this woman centenarian that she died at 110, but when I met her, she opened the door in her New York apartment. She was 100 years old and she was smoking, right? and I said, nobody told you to stop smoking. And she said, all 4 doctors that told me to stop smoking, they died, right? So they were resistant to the environment. I mean, imagine how longer she could have lived maybe if she didn't smoke, okay? Yeah. But they were resistant. So I think the next stage is to find their secret in order to really get more lifespan into that. And yeah, and the future, I don't see now how it happens clearly. I don't see how we break the 115 specifically, but I have no doubt that this is not going to be the end. There's many ways of how do you think of extending life by the Pinocchio way, right? By just slowing aging to begin with, or by stem cell approach or rejuvenation approach or organ approach, and a combination of approaches. I don't think that 115 in the future needs to stay 115, but at least to understand that it's a little bit different challenge than to utilize the lifespan that we have kind of built in and we could modulate.
Yeah, because I've heard a few people, scientists and Silicon Valley types, that are very bullish on the fact that we are going to hit, I don't know, immortality or 150 or 200 or all these crazy things. And again, like, I don't know, I don't know the science. Very well could be, but like you said, I just don't see that happening anytime in the near future.
It's hard to make predictions, in particular about the future, right?
Yeah.
They haven't done it in animals. I think first show me in animals that you double lifespan, and I would, by some way that we didn't think of, but and I'll turn immediately. But again, I'm saying, yeah, it will happen, but on what time course? Probably not relevant to me or to you.
Yeah. Nir, thank you so much for your time today. Your new book, Age Later, Health Span, Lifespan, and the New Science of Longevity, is out right now, right?
Yes.
Where can people find it, and where is the best places for people to find you?
Amazon. Amazon is the best way. And I have a Twitter, Nir Barzilai MD. So that's my best communication.
All right, cool. Guys, go check that out. And Nir, thanks again. This was very informative, very insightful, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks, and I wish you all to age later.